Yes.
All right, we've got all the speakers back up here. This is pretty informal. Don't feel like you have to restrict your questions to their talks either. Anything Ceph or tangentially related is good too.
Over there.
If they're not going to be asking questions, we'll be asking them questions.
Just about erasure coding, is there a good feeling about where we draw the line in terms of number of parity disks, I guess?
Parity chunks.
Parity chunks, yeah.
Yeah, so a question about erasure coding, it was where do you draw the line with parity chunks?
Yeah.
All right. Who's the erasure coding expert up here? You probably had more exposure than anyone else.
Well, I mean, I guess I can say how we decided what to do for ours. That's what Yahoo did.
What did you go with?
I
thought three. Yeah.
And of course,
That seems to be around the sweet spot.
yeah. I mean, I guess it, and you know, we have a really large cluster as well, so we can kind of afford to have, I guess, a higher number of chunks. I suspect if you have fewer OSDs, you're probably thinking that there's a higher overhead to the number of, to having a greater K plus N. So that's when I guess the other common one that seems to crop up is 4.2. Yeah, and then there's all sorts of interesting things like Sheck and so on as well. But because we're on Hammer, so that's not stable yet, I guess. We're waiting until June.
So we did, and again, a lot of it also depends upon the storage that you use. I mean, we did a lot of testing and comparison between the different erasure coding algorithms. We tested Cauchy-Good and Reed-Solomon. One thing that we found was that at least for Flash, again, this is experience with InfiniFlash, but I don't know if it is generic for all the other Flash as well, is the N+2, the Cauchy-Good N+2 was far outperforming the rest. And interestingly, even at the, we tried the most we tried is 14.2. 14 data bits and 14 data and 2 parity. Even with that, the performance was almost equivalent to a 2-copy replica. So I don't know if that's the same experience with the other media, but with
That's on Flash though, right?
On Flash,
Yeah.
it's completely on
Okay.
Flash. Right. So a lot of it also would depend upon the story, the type of disk that you're using.
If you've got IOPS to throw away.
That's very true. Even the rebuild times is much faster with Flash, so it worked out well.
Is there any experience with regards to performance in inter-campus or metro-like replication in the Ceph cluster?
So is your questions?
When it comes to performance, are there any numbers available? Let's say if you do a replication, I don't know, from here to the city or from here to Canberra.
So you mean having synchronous replication across geography?
Yeah. So if you have
So
if
you've
you
got
have multi-copy, you do.
yeah. So one crush map across multiple geographies. Yeah.
I guess I can probably start with that one, because there have been a couple of people that have started doing geo-replicated single Ceph clusters, or I guess WAN scale Ceph is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, no one has been doing it over truly public internet. All of the examples that I know of, like Deutsche Telekom does this. They have a single Ceph cluster that's replicated from northern Germany to southern Germany. It's a single Ceph cluster, but they control all the fiber in between, so it's almost cheating.
Yeah.
The MIMOS guys, the R&D wing of the Malaysian government, have a 3-site Ceph cluster that's, I think the longest stretch is 400 kilometers between sites, and they don't actually own all of that fiber. And I think they published some of these results and shared it in Ceph users, so maybe you can ask them again to share it again. But they seem to be getting relatively decent performance out of this cluster, and people, obviously will hit it in. I think they did some crazy magic with what's your primary copy per pool or whatever, and how's it replicated. But as far as I know, they're still doing that and getting usable performance. I don't know specific numbers though, you'd have to ask them. But I know there are people that are doing it. The hope was to start looking at some ways to introduce eventual consistency that is beyond your minimum strongly consistent replication level, so that you could have actual WAN scale Ceph that would circumnavigate the globe, even though you're not obviously going to be writing those copies in real time. But in terms of actual performance of people doing that, I would start with Ceph users. The people that are doing that are the only ones that really hold the keys to the actual numbers.
Yeah, I think you really need the asynchronous capability to really get to that.
Exactly.
And I'm familiar with what Deutsche Telekom is doing. In fact, they were doing that even with NetApp systems, a metro cluster distance.
Yeah.
So from what we heard from them, that they're selecting the workloads that are not too latency sensitive and just doing that. But for the other the key workloads, they're not replicating that across. So today, Ceph for the object layer, the gateway layer, it can do that asynchronous replication. I think that we need to do that for the RBD as well to enable.
Latency is going to kill you. with performance.
That's true,
Yeah.
and that's to be expected with the.
Yeah, I mean, it depends why you want it as well, right? Like, what's the use case?
Are you looking to do like Amazon region stuff, or are you looking just to
Similar
do
things.
DR?
I've been involved with Amazon quite a few times when their AWS cloud had some issues,
Yeah.
which is fairly regularly. So yeah, we've been looking into that as well. So it's quite interesting how they try to solve it.
Is that what you're looking to do though? Is have regions and populate your data across regions?
Yeah, something like that. So I was looking at
Yeah, really good.
synchronous and
Yeah.
asynchronous replication with different pools and things like that. Maybe some sort of overlay on top of that.
Do you need to write at all locations, or can you read?
No, it depends on the workload.
Okay.
Object
It's
storage?
impossible to tell now.
Yeah.
So,
Object storage.
yeah, primarily.
So it's probably a federated gateway set up
Yeah.
with, and then your sync agent, you allow writes at one location and then your sync agent will sync those across asynchronously to the other location.
So that's one workload that it'll solve it for, but
Yeah.
but being able to have multi-regional write and read,
Yeah, copies is fairly.
yeah, multi-master
I mean,
is
it
harder.
difficult,
You,
yeah.
you can kind of fudge asynchronousness by having cache tiering, but then the problem is,
The writes are going to be.
Yeah.
yeah, like you don't know whether you're going to be left in a consistent state to recover from.
Yeah.
So if you really do need to.
I would stop in at the next CDS. I can almost guarantee that there will be another WAN scale Ceph discussion, because I know the MIMOS guys were working on, there's a big dark fiber network that they were plugging into and trying to get Ceph to operate at WAN scales, and so they were taking a number of different kind of experimental approaches in that direction. So they'll be the ones to be able to tell you where that's at. Yeah.
Would one of the panel like to comment about multi-tenancy pools and pool namespaces? Someone who knows.
So somebody commenting on multi-tenancy and namespacing, especially as it relates to pools. I'm not the guy for that. Who's the guy for that?
Are we actually doing that?
Yeah, I think that I vaguely recall a mention of that in one of the presentations last week. Might have been Sage's one.
Is this the storage QoS that you're looking? Is that what you're
No, it's
interested in?
solving the security problem around having
Oh, okay.
multiple tenants in a
Yeah,
pool.
because
Okay.
you don't want to have multiple pools to have separate CephX because that's a non-trivial overhead.
Right.
But there's Rados namespaces allow you to get around that, but there's not support for the Rados namespaces
Yeah.
in some of the higher level tools, I guess. But I think that's supposed to be solved for Joule.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not, I don't think it's something that's happening yet, but it's on its way.
Yeah.
Yeah. There hasn't been a huge amount of push for it, just because most of the applications utilizing Ceph have their own security layer above it, so they don't have to worry about that as much. There's less multi-tenancy in Ceph pools and more just Ceph is providing the storage for a particular application. But we are starting to get more requests for that, so I'm sure you'll see more of a focus on that as we go forward.
I mean, we would like that sort of thing just to be able to do, you know, you've got the secure hypervisors here and they use a different pool, right? You don't really want to have a whole separate Ceph cluster for them.
Right.
But you definitely don't want, if somebody manages to compromise a hypervisor over there, you don't want to be able to read or delete all the data in the sensitive pool.
Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
If you're deploying Ceph to say back an OpenStack cluster, and you want to do volume, so Cinder, object, and CephFS, how does the single cluster handle that workload, or should it be split into separate? I'm pretty new to Ceph, so I'm just wondering how you deal with that, because each sort of volume and object, they've all got different workloads. So how does it handle that pretty well, or?
So, all right, let me see if I understand the question. You're saying, so CephFS, block device objects, how does it handle different workloads for different?
Yes.
A single cluster,
interfaces?
how
Yeah.
can you coexist multiple storage types in a single
Okay.
cluster?
Yeah, so obviously you can't physically tune for multiple different workloads. You can tune for I'm gonna get best effort for all things in terms of tuning. But in terms of the actual performance of the cluster itself, that's one of the nice parts about the Ceph architecture, is that you don't have, there's no bottlenecks, right? So all of the actual data path is client to a specific OSD, or more specifically, to multiple OSDs. So you're parallelizing a lot of that workload. So it's not like, all of your object is here and all of your file is here, and or it's not, everything is on one server. You're parallelizing pretty much everything. Even if you look at like your block device, it's a thinly provisioned block device that sits across multiple OSDs. Like, so any block device, rather than sitting on a physical server, is split across multiple hosts. And so by having multiple hosts, and of course, the more hosts you have in a Ceph cluster, the more you're going to be able to parallelize that. And you can control a lot of this with like placement group size and numbers of placement groups and things like that.
Crush map.
Yeah, your crush map. So a lot of this is user configurable. So at this point in time, there's a lot of advantage to taking people who have lots of experience and applying them to your Ceph cluster and using that as a learning tool too. But yeah, just the Ceph architecture itself really helps to kind of even out the workload across a cluster, especially as your cluster grows.
And
anyone else have anything to add to that?
yeah, I guess that diagram that I showed with the physical to logical layout of one of our clusters that has the Rados gateway and CephFS stuff there. You've got CephFS has a separate metadata pool, so you can tie that to different hardware, and so it's just like with any file system. If you've got the ability to separate the metadata, then you orient that storage for IOPS.
Yeah.
Right?
You can use the crush map to send different workloads to different hosts via the pools.
And also with Rados Gateway, you've got different pools for the management of Rados Gateway, like the users and the bucket indexes, the metadata, all that stuff. That's the stuff that you want to be fast. So you don't, if your backends are Erasure coded, you're still going to put that stuff on replicated, and so forth.
Comment just on this also on with CephFS.
Speak up.
Just to comment on this, on CephFS, you can actually have different directories, and you can, by setting proper extended attributes, set the pool where the data from these directories, where the objects from the directories will be stored. And for example, you can have, if you want something really fast, you can have a pool of SSDs, for example, serving one directory in CephFS, and other pool of more slower disks serving other kinds of use cases. So this is possible in CephFS. That's not already.
That's a lot of the part that's exciting about getting CephFS up to snuff too. You can have your var WW on Flash, and you can have your home on on spinning Rust. So
The elephant in the room, calamari.
Used to be
What's
Ceph.
what's the take on that?
So
It seems to be hovering so here and there, and nobody actually knows what's going on. And is there anything from the Ceph core side that's
right. So actually, and by you using the word calamari, that probably tells me that we're not doing a good enough job. That calamari is now the API, and Romana is the actual physical GUI. So they've split those two things, and they've been focusing a lot on calamari, the API, because there are a number of different monitoring / management type tools out there that are doing what calamari used to do part of. And so they really wanted to kind of enable the people, the vast community of people that was developing these tools, rather than trying to do it all ourselves with the 1 or 2, 1.5 guys that we had working on calamari. Romana is still being developed. It's still in the Red Hat Ceph storage, or whatever they call it now. That has been growing by leaps and bounds. The hopes is one of the next versions, we will be able to do things like, install new OSDs or spin up a Ceph cluster using nothing but the GUI. So there's definitely growth and movement in Romana, the GUI, but a lot of the focus has been on Calamari, the API, which will allow, Intel's VSM, Inkscope, Orange guys did one. So there's a number of them out there. They're all open source as far as I know. Have started to use the Calamari API. So more and more people are saying, I already have a management dashboard that I just want to plug this thing into. So now you can, with this architecture, you can plug it into whatever your existing dashboard tool is. Or if you want something off the shelf, you can use Romana or VSM or Inkscope or any of the ones that are available. So
Is Romana going to be upstreamed, Patrick, or is it going to be part of Red Hat Ceph?
no, Calamari.
No,
or,
Calamari is-
Romana is open source as well.
Okay.
It's open stream. It's got its own thing. You can see. I think calamari.read the docs has all the information on everything. But yeah, it's all open source. That was something Sage and I did 2 weeks after the acquisition, which was took Calamari and threw it out the door.
Yeah, just about anything we do in Red Hat Ceph storage will be
Yeah,
abstract.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's the idea.
So can I ask the audience the question? I mean, for those of you who are using Ceph or in operational status with Ceph, including you, Blair, is there any thoughts on needing a GUI, or are you going to be using a GUI, or and if so, any preferences?
Yeah, we started using Calamari, now Romana, whatever it was, a while back, just for monitoring essentially to get a bit of a high level picture of everything that was there. The issue we had was we had 1,000 OSDs and we could only see 200 of them.
Okay.
So yeah, that was pretty short-lived.
Yeah.
But it was handy to get an overview of what your cluster looked like.
So for you, it's primarily a monitoring tool?
Yeah.
Okay.
The thing is that if you don't have a GUI, you won't get a critical mass behind.
That's
the
true.
You see the same thing with VMware. They started off with a command line interface as well, and that didn't go any further than VMware Workstation .9 or something, and then they had to come up with a GUI in order to make something happen, and then it took off like a rocket.
Yeah.
So there has to be some effort in
That's true.
even if it's just for monitoring, or at least get a bit of overview what's going on there, monitoring, alerting, all these RAS capabilities. So that's something you need to take into account.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I said, there is effort that's going into it. It's just we have limited development resources. And we figured it would be better to enable the people who had more development resources to make or extend their own already open source monitoring tools.
So there are multiple of them, right? Not just one today.
Yeah.
Right. So depending upon how they're getting the traction, right, there'll be more resources put into it.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, in terms of strictly monitoring, I think Romana is probably still the best. They've done a lot of good improvements on large cluster, visualization type stuff. In terms of management, I think VSM is probably out in front of the pack. That's the Intel one. You can actually deploy a cluster. You can add and remove OSDs. You can do actual physical maintenance on your Ceph cluster through the GUI. So I think they focused on that, whereas Romana started off as more just a pure monitoring tool.
There's Red Hat Storage Console as well, which is cluster specific at the moment and based on over similar to the RevM console or the RevM Rev Manager. It wouldn't surprise me if you see some cross-pollination there coming across to the Ceph side as well.
Already the plugins being developed into Horizon or into the OpenStack side when it comes to Ceph?
So right now, the majority of GUI work around Ceph and Gluster is actually being done on a tool called USM, which is the Universal Storage Manager or something like that. USM. Yeah. And it's supposed to be able to do all the things. You know, it's going to be the silver bullet, I guess. But in reality, it's going to be the management and deployment and monitoring tool that can do Ceph and Gluster, or I guess Gluster. And then that one is also going to be extended, if I understand correctly, into OpenStack as well. So you'll be able to do lots of the things that you might want to do with USM. And it will.
You go from OpenStack Horizon to USM to Ceph, or from OpenStack to Horizon from Horizon to USM to Gluster. Is that some bit of a gateway kind of functionality?
I think USM is going to be a standalone thing for Ceph and Gluster, and there will be a USM add-on / plugin that you can add to Horizon if you're using it strictly in an OpenStack context.
Yeah, strictly within the OpenStack, the Horizon today works, right? Because Ceph is, working through Cinder and Swift, right? And Horizon can handle all the Swift data elements fine. It doesn't make any. So you really don't need to have any changes required for the Horizon to work.
Right. I think he's saying that the Horizon doesn't have.
There's another abstraction layer that you don't have with Cinder and Swift. So not really tied into the Ceph cluster itself.
So Horizon can't show the physical up-down of all your OSDs, and it can't.
Oh, up below. Okay, yeah. Right. Those
Yeah.
extensions have not been. Yeah, you're right.
Horizon's not really an admin tool.
Yeah,
anyway.
that's right. It's just primarily it's a very lightweight.
Yeah.
It's an example.
You can do some of the
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
but it's missing a lot of the things as well.
I was just putting in an example.
So USM will be completely API controllable. So there'll be north and southbound APIs that you can use to orchestrate stuff. So that could plug into CloudForms or Horizon or OpenStack or pick your tool of choice.
Other questions?
So what is the audience experience with orchestration? Are any of you using Ceph Deploy? Are you happy with that? Or when you move to any of these other orchestration tools, Puppet?
Yeah, let's start with a show of hands. So who's using Ceph Deploy? Okay, brave. Chef? Puppet? Puppet, okay. Ansible? Salt? How about Juju? I love Juju. I can't explain it. Crowbar? I think that's all of them. So it looks like primarily Puppet, Chef, Ceph Deploy, and a little bit of Ansible. Nice. All right, now I want to know history, as long as we're showing up hands here. So what are we, Infernalis? So anybody on the latest and greatest? I'll see where the concentration is as we go back. How about Hammer?
Mm-hmm.
Hammer, okay. Giant, who has been using since Giant. Firefly, okay. Emperor.
You're talking about
Dumpling?
since Emperor, or are you talking?
Yeah, since. I want to know where
Okay,
people came in, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, Dumpling. Yeah, you're still Dumpling, okay.
No, sorry, I came in at Dumpling.
Came in at Dumpling, you're on, okay. How about Cuttlefish? Who was a user since Cuttlefish? You're on Cuttlefish? All right, any Bobtails?
Maybe
How
I
about
think NCI might have been on Bobtail.
Yeah, Bobtail? How about Argonaut? Any Argonaut users? All right, those are the tried few. And you
Still happily running it.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Not great.
What?
On it for a long time.
What's that?
Greenbase was on Bobtail for like.
Oh yeah, no, they're on Hammer now.
Oh,
Yeah, they're on Hammer now. Yeah, they've got 3 Ceph clusters now, so they've kind of started to keep up with the flow now.
Do they still have one Ceph admin?
I think they're up to 2.
Oh wow, okay.
1.5. Yeah. No, that's
three hosts. That's true.
yeah. That's
That
one of
was
my
the-
favorite parts. Is I always early days of Ceph, I would go out there and I would tell people about all the coolness about Ceph, and invariably I would get people that came up to me afterwards that were hardcore old school sysadmin, storage admin people. And they'd say, all right, well, how many terabytes per storage head do I need to think about? I was like, no. You got 1 or 2 Ceph admins can handle, hundreds of petabytes worth of Ceph storage, and they just never believed me. Any other questions? All right, I think people want to get to the beer. So, Blair, are you going to tell us how to?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So we can tell you we can all just walk over. It's like 5 minutes away. But what's the building number? What's our address?
It's 15 Innovation Walk, but it's quite simple. We'll walk out this door here,
Game mode too.
and we'll walk along the main road just here, and it will wrap around, and you'll see one last building. You're going to walk to the right hand. It doesn't matter. Walk right or left side of that building, and it's that next building after that where we're.
That was not simple at all.
Yeah. So it's really simple. You're just going to follow this road around. That's all you have to do.
You're just going to follow Steve.
Let's say we're going to put a big red hat on that guy.
If you put 15 Innovation Walk into Google Maps,
you'll get there.
You'll get there. Yeah.
All right.
That was the easy answer.
Just wanted to thank Monash for hosting us today.
Yeah. So, thanks to Red Hat for buying lunch and beers and stuff too.
That's right. So thank you very much.
A little gift pack.